In today's video, we're going to discuss what you need to know before sending your son or daughter off to college with regards to insurance. Let's get after it. You're sending your son or daughter off to college for the first time, maybe second time, third time, fourth time, grad school, what have you. So now we really need to understand how your insurance is going to come into play or not. So what we're going to look at today is one, whether or not your son or daughter needs to purchase renter's insurance. We're going to look at whether or not your homeowner's policy would actually step in and provide coverage for your student while away at college. And then we're going to look at how your auto insurance is going to come into play when it comes to your college student. All right, first things first, big question. We get this question 1,000 times a year around the mid to late August timeframe. The question goes like this. Do I need to buy renter's insurance for little Johnny or Sally? Well, the answer is no. Technically, you do not need to purchase renter's insurance if you have your own homeowner's insurance. Now, does that mean you're going to get away without purchasing it? Sometimes we find that the apartment complexes that you're trying to get your son or daughter into are just not going to budge when it comes to actually the kid having their own renter's insurance. But I'll caution you here. If you can avoid it, do not purchase the insurance from that apartment complex, because here's what they're going to do. They're going to give you a renter's insurance policy, and they're going to either have $100,000 of liability or $300,000 of liability. And while this sounds like a bunch, if your son or daughter, let's say, has a small kitchen fire and they're in a nice apartment complex, how much do you think it's going to cost to fix said apartment? God forbid they burn the whole place down. We suggest purchasing your own renter's insurance for little Johnny or Sally, making sure that you have at least $1 million of liability. And then when it comes to the personal contents, the personal property, most renters policies from most standard carriers, you're going to be required to have at least $12,000 worth of contents, whether or not they have it. So just get the $12,000 of contents, make sure that it's replacement cost. And look, you're talking about less than probably $200 a year. Whereas if you buy it from the apartment complex, you're probably looking at $20 a month, $25 a month, $30 a month. They're gonna give you probably little to no personal property, and they're gonna give you, again, $100,000 to $300,000 worth of liability. Your best plan of action is to reach out to your agent and actually get little Johnny or Sally their own renter's insurance using those criteria. Okay, so we just talked about the fact that you don't technically need renter's insurance. So let me tell you why that is. If you have a homeowner's policy, then your son or daughter are automatically covered when they're away at college as long as they meet two criteria. Number one, your child is 24 years or younger. Number two, your child is considered a full-time student. As long as those two criteria are in place, then your homeowner's coverage is going to travel with them. It's going to travel with them and include their personal property. So if they had items stolen, if their apartment building burned down and they lost all their stuff, then your homeowner's personal property would kick in and cover them. And more importantly, your liability is going to follow them wherever they go. So what do you need to do with regards to your homeowner's policy? Well, number one, make sure your personal liability is $1 million. We talked about earlier why this is so important. Make sure it's $1 million. The cost difference between $300,000 and $1 million, probably $8 to $10 a year. Very cheap. Why people don't carry $1 million is beyond me. And number two, let's make sure that your policy includes personal injury. Now, good news, if you have an HE7 policy in the state of North Carolina, personal injury is automatically included. If, on the other hand, you have an HO3 policy, then that policy would need to have been endorsed to include it. And I'll tell you, most of the time, we just don't see agents endorsing it for personal injury. So contact your agent and say, hey, please endorse my liability to include personal injury. So what is personal injury? Personal injury falls under your personal liability. but it brings into account things like libel and slander. And you and I both know that sometimes kids will say and do the darndest things, and the last thing you want is for you to get a lawsuit because your son slandered someone, and slander is speech, libel is written. Make sure that you have personal injury on your personal liability. All right, so we've talked about whether or not you need renter's insurance. We've talked about your homeowner's policy and how it reacts to when your kid is away at college. So what about your personal auto policy? Well, the good news is, once again, it follows your child. Now, we've had people in the past call us and say, hey, my son or daughter is going to school in New York. They cannot have a car. I want to take them off the policy. Well, you can do this. We don't suggest it because, number one, if you want to remove your child from the policy, they actually have to turn their license in. So you might say, well, they don't have a car at college. Well, what if they get in someone else's car and drive it and then get in an accident? If they're not on your personal auto policy, you've got no coverage. Make sure you keep them on your policy unless they turn their license in. You've got coverage whether they get in, do something crazy, and a lawsuit follows. So what if they're taking their car to college? Do you need to notify your insurance provider? Are they gonna have to change the location garaging address on the policy? Well, for most carriers, you don't really need to do anything. The fact is, we in North Carolina, I have a client whose daughter was fortunate enough to get a scholarship out in Utah to play volleyball. He calls me, what do we need to do? I talk to the underwriter and it says, look, anywhere in the United States, that car can be taken by that college student without you having to do anything, and coverage is still there. So the auto policy, easiest part of the whole transition. All right, so now you are all prepared. Take little Johnny or Sally to college. You know exactly what you need to do or not do with regards to insurance. Hey folks, hope this has been helpful. Check out our YouTube channel for other videos. And until next time, we'll see you.